Hello, everyone.
Hello,
We should be
everybody.
live. Hopefully, we're live.
Yes, you saw our slightly scared pause. Is everything working? I can see some people in the chat. Hello, Miami fashion stylist. And
I'm
do
just realizing I didn't sign in to see the chat, so I'm gonna do that right now, really fast. Why don't you introduce
yes.
yourself?
So, hello, everybody. Welcome to our shared live. It's our Tricky Thursday live inspired by Trisha. I'm Charlotta. And I've got a pattern cutting school, so it's called Charlotta's Pattern Cutting School. And I'm joined today by the lovely Trisha from Creative Costume Academy.
And I can't remember my password because
No,
he does it. So I can't see anybody's chat right now.
okay.
Hi, everyone.
But we go live once a month to share our love of pattern making. And I know a lot of you are also fellow pattern cutting nerds, and we just absolutely love pattern cutting. We think it's great fun. It's a great achievement. And once you learn it, it's a superpower, isn't it? So we love to share it and hopefully introduce more of you to this superpower. And that's why we have these sort of really fun lives once a month. We pick a topic. Today's topic is blocks and slopers versus commercial pattern cutting. So how do they work? How do you get started? Well done. You're better prepared than me. And
I got a comment about wanting to see more visuals last time. I'm giving up on signing in for the moment, but I'm going to try to, because I want to see your chat. Thank you. If you're chatting on my page, I'm going to try to figure out how to see that.
Can you just open a
I can open the
yes, because I can see it on YouTube, and yes, there's lots of people very happy you're live on your chat.
Hi, for those of you who are on my page, welcome. My name is Trisha. I call myself your pattern nerd friend, and Charlotta is one of my best pattern nerd friends. We love everything about pattern making, fitting, and sewing. And, just like she said, we go live once a month. My background, it's always fun because I'm American in the US, and my background is theater and costuming, and Charlotta is German living in London.
Yes, in England, yes. And I'm from a pure fashion and pattern cutting background. So we bring in really different expertise, experience, and lots of different words as well and pronunciation. So it's always really good fun to get together and compare and learn from you as well in the chat. Like you always have really good input.
In England. Oh no, oh, there we go. Okay. I had to mute us so I could see chats now. Okay.
Good.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I didn't want to not be able to see you. That's part of the fun.
No, it's really good seeing here.
Like to hear from you. So please, even though we're chatting, we're talking, we want to hear from you. And if you have any questions on these topics, we have some that I know Charlotta collected from her page on Instagram. But I actually am the one who picked this topic this time, just because this is a question that I hear a lot from students, from people who are learning pattern making. How do you use this sloper, and how do you use it with a commercial pattern, and how do you know which one to start with? So that's why we thought it was a very good topic for us to start with today. But if you have an opinion about what we're saying, if you have a question about what we're talking about, please leave it in the chat. This is not us just having our own conversation. We like to hear from you and hear what you guys think too.
Exactly. And I think today's topic is one of those things which is probably applicable to everybody, where we're using blocks and slopers, where we're using commercial sewing patterns, because they are similar, they're different, you can use them for different purposes. And they're also, there's a lot of it, you can use one or the other, depending on what you want to do. And as Trisha said, we get asked about it quite a lot. So we thought it would be a fantastic topic, which is really of interest to everybody, whether you're a block girl like me or more of a mixed bag like Trisha, I think.
Yeah. I like to use whatever works.
Yes.
Actually, I'll start with, I did a quick reel today to talk about, to get everybody to come. And yes, Miami fashion stylists, we are live on both of our channels. That's why we're kind of new to how this whole technology thing works.
Yes. But we've got sound. We're live today. We've
yeah,
managed
we've got
it.
sound. We hope you can see us both. So please let us know if that's not the case. But yeah, we figured it out because we used to go back and forth. But please do follow, if you're whoever's channel you're on, please go and follow the other one. So that, you know, we're both getting some love, and if you could like,
Yes.
you know, the video, so that YouTube knows that you like this sort of thing, and it helps it push out to, it helps the algorithm know, hey, we want to find more people who like the same things that you like. So I wanted to mention, so I did a reel, and I was talking about the questions I thought we would talk about today, and come join us, you know, all the thing. And somebody commented, I can't remember her name right off the top of my head, but she was saying that she liked my top. So first of all, thank you. And she asked if I made it, which I have. And then we realized right before we jumped on, Charlotta and I are kind of twinsies today. Both have this collar and like these bold prints. So that was not planned. We did not call each other, but that was just kind of a fun, happy accident. And she asked this comment, she asked whether I used my sloper or I used a commercial pattern. And I had to think about it, honestly. And what it was, so this sweater, and I kind of stand up so you can see the whole thing. It's a high-low, like it went high,
nice,
low and back. So I don't know why, but I had this thought. I'm like, you know, it'd be fun to like have a sweatshirt that was high-low. So I did use a commercial pattern, but it is very rare when I take a commercial pattern and don't change some part of it, which is the awesome part about knowing pattern making, is that if you have an idea and you have something already, a pattern already that exists, you can do that as a jumping off point too. Like you can make adjustments. So I took a sweatshirt pattern that I had in my stash, and I just drafted it to come up a little higher in the front, lower in the back. And then I think I added this collar was something that I added, but the rest of it was just part of the pattern. So I actually did use a commercial pattern, but then I used my pattern making knowledge to make it uniquely mine. And I do that a lot.
So you really, you used your commercial pattern as a sweatshirt block to draft, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I do that all the time, because why make things hard if they don't have to be? So yeah, I used, because this isn't a fitted garment that, you know, I could tell by the measurements that it was going to work for me. I think before I added the bottom band, I kind of did a double check and looked. And then actually I took this pattern, I didn't put the collar on, and I did like a off the shoulder and did a different like kind of see-through sweatshirt, and I made a second one off of the same pattern, a high-low as well. So yeah, I used the commercial pattern kind of like a block, because once you know how patterns work, how to do pattern making things, those skills apply to any pattern. You don't have to always use a sloper. You can take a pattern that already exists and apply those principles, change the design, and use those skills to create something unique off of a pattern that already exists, which is why I love it so much, because it's like there's so many options, there's so many things you can do. So I just wanted to say that.
Shall we take a step back and talk a little bit about what we actually mean by blocks and slopers and commercial patterns? And also, before we get started, we got so excited about the topic, we dived quite in, and we both put links in our description. So if you actually want to learn more about pattern making, we both have stuff going on where you can learn with us. So Trisha has the wait list for the very exciting PatternCon, which is happening when?
PatternCon. Okay, so first of all, it was Andrea. It was you. That comment about I didn't recognize your handle on Instagram. So yes, PatternCon 2025 is happening. This is the inaugural year. I've been working my booty off behind the scenes.
I think at least a year, isn't it? I remember.
Usually, but I'm going 6 months, you know, why not?
No, but I remember you mentioning it a year ago. So it's been like,
talking about it for years. I've been planning this. I mean, part of me teaching at like Quilt Fest last year and Sew Expo last year, which is happening actually right now, and going to ASG the year before that, you know, all of that was in preparation so that I could figure it out how to do it for PatternCon. So we are biting the bullets. We've booked the hotel. Finally, it's going to be at the Sheridan Airport Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina, August 16th and 17th. We're going to have full, we have 8 different classrooms of classes, a ballroom, vendor halls, goodie bags, engagement things. We're going to feed you, so it's just going to be a blast. It's going to be so much fun. So if you are interested in joining us, we are still putting together like the back end stuff, but we do have a party list. So what we're calling it right now. You can sign up. That link is down in my bio. I think Charlotta has it as well. And then if we also have coming up, I think it's in 2 weeks, my private membership, like we were talking about, I have a private pattern making membership, and that is going to be open. We only open the doors to that twice a year. We are about to open that again, and we will do a pre-sale to people who are like eager and want to get going. And that will only be available to our wait list for the pattern place. So if you're like, I want to learn with Trish, I want to learn more about it, get on the wait list. And we are basically, we have a virtual pattern party, all the time, constantly ongoing. But PatternCon will be an in-person like get together, and let's gather. We're calling it Gather Together. Patterns that unite us, skills that I'm butchering our tagline.
Oh, no.
I should know better by now, but
Just sing it next time.
So yeah, and then Charlotta has an exciting challenge coming up, right?
Yes, so you still got just under a week to join my live design and draft challenge, which starts next Wednesday. It's 3 live sessions over 3 weeks, and you get recordings as well because different time zones and all these sort of things. But it's a way to get to know me a bit better, to get to know how I teach. It's completely free, but it's held on my own website, so you have to sign up. And when I'm in 3 sessions, I'm going to cover how to design clothes. Then we're going to do a whole session of dart manipulation, easy volume, and I think I'm going to actually make the famous popover dress people either hate or love. I'm going to make my own version of that, because that teaches you lots of skills. You can use in different styles as well, but it'd be fun to figure it out. And I'm also going to do a fit check, so you can join in. There will be some challenges, and it's just a really fun 3-week session to maybe give you a little bit of a boost in your pattern making, to do some pattern hacking on your sewing patterns, because I, like Trisha, I'm open to using either, whatever works best. And then it's also a way of then basically joining a new course offering, which has some live sessions, which are really small group sessions, which is new and it's going to be really limited, and you can only get it if you do a live session. But if you don't, you can also just join me and have some fun exploring design and drafting.
Fun.
Yes, yeah, it's sort of like, that's what I just love doing it and sort of meeting you all. And I know Trisha is the same. Yeah, if you want to learn with us afterwards, that's fantastic. But you're also welcome to just join us for a bit of pattern cutting fun. And our Miami fashionist.
All of those links, both of us have all of those links down in the chat. And hi, Eric. Hello. And then Mella's here. Hi, Mella. Mella was just my partner in crime for the retreat that we just hosted. And hi, Sue. Hi, Sandra. Welcome, everybody.
And I've got lots like Saskia and Laura and Evita and Rebecca and Karen and Miami Fashion Stylist. So hello. Yeah, it's a bit weird having a double chat, isn't it? Because
we used to be able to see the same thing. So that's all right.
Yes.
It's a bigger party.
Yes, yeah. It's sort of like separate room. Like it's like your pattern con already, isn't it? You've got 7 rooms going on.
So cool. And this year, since it's our inaugural year for PatternCon, we won't be able to have like a virtual part as well, but it's on the list.
One day I will join you.
So that we can get Charlotta involved.
Yes, totally.
Get her out here. So do we want to go back and talk about what a sloper is, what a block is, and how you would use that? Going back to
So blocks, I think, are American. Blocks are English or British. Slopers are American. I don't actually know what the rest of the world calls it. I would love to hear if you're.
I've also heard it called, I think Gina Renee calls it a base pattern.
Oh, yes.
And then one of the questions you got was, what is the difference between a sloper and a moulage, right? I get that question a lot.
Yes,
too.
I get that too. And they're very different. Yeah, so a slope or a block is like your base template. It's basically like a really boring sewing pattern. It's got the minimal shaping. It doesn't have any design lines. It literally just fits you, but it's not skin tight. It already has garment ease, so it is a garment as such.
Here's a basic
Sugar fun.
size.
And that's what I would call it. That's like your main block, your basic block or basic slope. But you can of course then also from that draft different blocks, which are then like Trisha's sewing the sweatshirt she used. That so sweatshirt could be also a block. Like I've just added an oversized block tutorial to my website, which is super fast, but then you got that sort of block for oversized styles, and you can do some without the bust start as well. So there's options, but they're always already garments. And a moulage, originally the word is just the French for draping on the body or on the mannequin. So that's what you would think of sort of haute couture, early Dior, all the sort of big couture houses where they drape the pattern directly either on a mannequin for commercial sizing or for haute couture for the individual sizes.
And does it, mistake me if I'm wrong or if you have a different understanding, I always thought that moulage is like a second skin.
That's what it's meant. That was my next thing. You can also use it to call basically a skin tight block. And again, that is quite often draped on you or on a mannequin. So I've got one, which is literally, it's fantastic for really tight dresses. And that was draped on me by a friend. So it really fits nicely.
Kenneth King has a draft. He usually drafts moulage, not draping.
Yeah, I think you can do a very closely fitted block basically, but I think the problem is at some point, we're talking about it on the live Q&A, one of my students, she actually got a made to measure mannequin. Is it called a mimiquin or something? The mannequins which are like in your measurements. Yeah, she's got one of those, and so she's been draping it on in. But you know how all the different curves we have at the back and stuff like that. So they are quite hard to fully draft. So they are easier to actually drape on somebody else. So you get like the perfect fit.
And I'm gonna plug my good friend Carol from Ditto Forms here.
Oh yes, that's a different one.
Made to measure dress form that is exactly a replica of you. They are fabulous. It's a great way to do something like that, to drape a moulage. Ditto Forms, what she does, if you sign up for that, she will come and do a 3D scan of your body, and then you're given a foam replica of your body, and it's so handy for doing stuff like that.
And I think mimiquin might be the British version of that. And they do a similar sort of thing.
Oh, mimic. Yeah, there are a couple. There are a couple out there. And some, there's varying ways that they collect that information, because the scan is the most important part.
Yes.
Like, to get the correct information so that the bodies that they produce are off of that scan.
And there's also some, you can draft some yourself. I've seen people do it. There's another company where you can, Bootstrap.
You can put in measurements, and they will send you something that I think you build together.
Yes.
I have not personally, and they're
no. So I think whenever measurements are involved, you probably 95% there, isn't it? Because it's like where are these there? And Snoops is saying a moulage for corset. Yes, so that would be perfect.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, good. You're seeing.
I'm seeing your messages. Yes, I'm
that's on my channel.
Yes, I'm peeking into your channel.
I know. If I could see mine on.
I'm eavesdropping.
Your chat at the same time, but I'm not that set up today. Oh, hi, Patricia. Good to see you. Patricia's here too. She's one of my VIP private clients. And J.D. McKinnon. From Oklahoma City, and also excited for the festival. I assume you're talking about PatternCon.
Yes.
We have an Edinburgh, Scotland in the house.
Yes, hello Kathleen.
Oh, Kathleen, it's so good good to see you. And Cindy from Chicago. It's like a big reunion. I love it. Okay, so yeah, moulage could be used for building corsets or doing like bustiers, like what you mentioned, Christian Dior and stuff. So they would build like the foundations for dresses and things.
And
with
I've
a
got
moulage.
mine actually. So if I just show you the difference between,
Oh, hi, Tremaine. Tremaine's here too.
sorry, trying to find the, so this is my very fitted block, and you can see that's actually got seams, and the seams sort of help
Right. Instead of
really
the
get
sharp.
all the curves, because it's sort of, with a basic pattern, it sort of skims. It's not skin tight. So the skin tight moulage is great for these sort of vintage dresses.
Yeah,
Because
the
you
very
can,
fitted, like
yeah.
very fitted bodices and things. Yeah. So basically going back to what a sloper or a block is, since that's kind of what we're talking about, like a moulage is a version of a sloper.
Very
or a
tight
block,
version, yeah.
Just a more tightly fitted one. But and also I want to say, you know, we were saying that you can have slopers that you build or a block that you build off of a basic sloper, as you know, oversized, no dart, those
Coat.
kinds of things. You could also have, yeah, a coat or a jacket sloper. You can have a pant, you know, pant slopers, sleeve slopers. When I'm making acrobat costumes, I have a whole set of unitard slopers.
Oh yeah, I've got one that's great for underwear and
Yeah.
swimsuits as well.
Yeah. So really the term sloper or block is meant to just be, this is a starting point of, and Kelly's here. Hi, Kelly. And I'm going to say something, a question that Kelly had in our membership the other day. You know, when you're building your sloper or your block, and it's going to be your everyday use sloper, the one that you go off of most of the time, you should incorporate ease, like just basic wearing ease. So it shouldn't be skin tight. It should be the amount of ease that you would want in most of the patterns that you're going to create off of that block, so that you don't have to always consider adding that extra ease, that extra room, breathing room in.
And I think that's one of the biggest sort of misunderstanding or mistakes people make, that they overfit it, because then it's actually not practical for everyday use. So actually, like, your block, it doesn't have to be like our basic blocks. If you say, I never wear waisted clothes, your block could literally be a more looser garment, which, you know, with more wearing ease as such.
Yeah. Oh, and we've got Lisa from North Carolina. Looking forward to this topic, Kelly. So that's why you were saying, trying to determine which method I want to use for my current project, blending patterns or modify my sloper.
I had a question as well.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's why we wanted to have this discussion. So, and hi, Sheila. So that's just so we all are on the same page. We know what a sloper, a block is, and the difference between that and a moulage. And so, would you say you're mainly a sloper girl, right? Like,
yes.
You always
yeah. But it's because in fashion, you do a commercial size. So you always have a block for that. And when you add the design, and then if I'm teaching, actually at the moment I'm teaching in real life a lot, and very using commercial sewing patterns a lot of the time. So I'm happy to do it as well. But what I teach is for my blocks, but I always say you can use a sewing pattern. You can turn any sewing pattern into a block. You just take the seam allowance off if you want to make big changes, and if you have a woven pattern with darts, you just have to extend your darts, and then you have another block, like Trisha did. You know, anything become a block. It just means you design off it. Yeah. So I use
jumping off point. It's a starting point. Usually you're like what Charlotta said, it's a boring, no frills, basic garment that you then add design elements to make it more what you're wanting. Violetta asked, knit versus woven block. Yes, you would have a knit sloper and you would have a woven sloper, or knit block, woven block. They would be two separate starting points, right? Because you have to incorporate the stretch factor for knit. So one thing I want to talk about with like the advantages, I guess, is a good place to start, of why you would want to use a sloper, or why you would have a sloper or a block, and like the advantages of starting at like using that as your starting point. Actually, but before we get into that, I think that's our next trajectory. But I just want you touched on something that I think is really important. Is most of the time when people think about learning pattern making. In fact, I just recorded a video about this that I'll be putting out next week. But most of the time when you are learning pattern making, you start by drafting a sloper. That's like the first thing, because you got to have your base pattern to make other patterns off of. Drafting a sloper from scratch using your measurement is one way to get a sloper. Another way to get a sloper is you can purchase them. I have them for sale on my website. I give them to all of my students when they sign up with me. They have access to all my slopers. So you can use that as a starting block, fit that to yourself, and then that becomes your sloper. That's what we just did in the weekend retreat that we did. So so that's one way. And then another way is what Charlotta mentioned, is you can take a pattern that you think it fits you nicely, you always like it, it feels good when you wear it, it's a pattern you always use over and over, that can become your sloper. So we are saying that there is a big advantage to having a sloper, but there are many different ways to get that sloper. So if you've drafted one and you're like, my sloper was horrible and I hated it and I couldn't do it, that's just one way to get a sloper.
Yes, and you could also clone something to make your own sloper.
Yes, you can also clone
if you have a favorite that's
that
like a favorite t-shirt or something.
Yep,
yes.
Yep.
And
that's a great one.
My favorite thing about a block or sloper is that you don't have to do any fitting or maybe minimal fitting. And that is my least. Well, I love fitting other people. I don't like fitting myself, which is why I just.
Well, it's harder.
Yeah. So it's so I just love it. You know, this is my go-to block, which is a relaxed block, so it hasn't got any bust starts. And I know I can make any sort of slightly skimming, relaxed style from it, and it will always work. And I don't have to suddenly think, oh. Because I was telling Trisha before we went live, I'm teaching in real life at the moment. So we're doing a lot of fitting, and we're using 3 different big brand commercial patterns today. They're all not similar sizes, but they all have like quite big busted. And the darts are completely different. And you're starting to spot, that dart can't quite work. That's far too big. And you don't know until you put it on the trial. You can sort of know it's wrong, but you still have to do all your adjustments. But with a block, once you got your block, whether that's a sewing pattern or, as Trisha said, an average size one, you never have to do that again, you know. Or and at least like not for, like you might have to tweak it from time to time, but you know where to tweak it because it fits you. And then if you change sizes a bit, if you change body a bit, you can easily fix it. And it's not like a big job where you don't know. But I don't like about commercial sewing patterns is that element of, will it work? You can sort of spot it from the pattern, but there's always a little bit of a chance, how will it fit, that sleeve, all these sort of things, which you never have with a block or sloper.
So that is the number one main advantage. That's why people start with drafting slopers when you're starting to learn pattern making. That's why we talk about it being like this golden pattern, because, and you do have to, we do want to say that even if you draft it from scratch, you do need to test the fit.
Yes.
First.
And
spend the time fitting your sloper, fitting your block to get it fit the way you want, then it can be this reliable thing that everything that you make off of it is going to work.
And I think both Trisha and I actually agree that if you're new to pattern cutting, you shouldn't actually start by drafting a block. I think it's sort of certain fashion schools do it. I didn't draft a block till much later on. So I agree with Trisha. To begin with, you don't want to spend an hour measuring, drafting, fitting it. To begin with, if you have a sewing pattern or an average size sloper, fit that, because that'd be much faster. And then later on, once you understand how pattern making works, then you can draft your sloper and you'll be much better at it because you actually understand what it all means. But I would actually say if you're new to it, do some pattern hacking, like Trisha's top, that's pattern hacking as such.
Pattern hacking is, my girl Dejanay said this once and I love it. She's like, pattern hacking is like the gateway drug to pattern making, like pattern drafting. And it so is, because if you can start changing the patterns and using basic pattern techniques to get a different design, that is essentially pattern making. You are starting to alter and adjust patterns. And making fitting adjustments is pattern making. You're making pattern adjustments to your pattern.
And I would actually put pattern hacking, it's just a different word for designing, and pattern cutting. I would put it at the same level. Yeah. It's just, I think it sort of sounds maybe less scary, so people use it, and it's used mostly for commercial patterns, and it's also probably done more by people who haven't got formal training. So I see it's, oh yeah, I'm hacking stuff. Like you're the outsider in, but it's ultimately the same. You're taking control, you're designing, you're drafting, whatever you want to call it.
Whatever you have to do to get to what you're trying, like find the path of least resistance. If you have something like a sweatshirt pattern that already exists, why would I start from zero and scratch and not know if it's going to have enough ease or not, or do all the raglan sleeve? But if I have something that already exists and I can just add a collar and change the hem, and that's what I'm going for, that's going to get me there faster. It's not cheating. There's no cheating. No. There's no cheating. What do you have? What tools do you have available to you to get to your end result? Now, Violetta brought the golden question that I was waiting for this to come in. We were going to talk about it, but we might as well jump into it. Could you adapt commercial patterns to your blocks you already fit to yourself? And this right here is probably the #1 question that we get. I know for sure I do.
I had similar question today as well in the chat on my Instagram.
So here is the thing. The purpose of a sloper, the purpose of this tool is to draft other patterns off of it. It's to have something that starts that already fits you so that you can start to play and design and hack it like we were just talking about. It is not meant to take this and compare it against this and know that if I take this and compare it against this, then this will now fit perfectly as well. The reason that doesn't always work, there is a way to do it, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I want to tell you the actual reason for this is for drafting new designs. It's not meant to compare it against existing patterns to make them fit perfectly, because when they designed these patterns, they used a completely different sloper that was drafted by somebody else. It was drafted for another body type. And then they took that sloper and added design ease and design things into making it the style that this is. In this case, it's a jacket. So there's extra ease built in. So it's going to be really hard to compare your sloper or your block to an existing pattern because you don't know what they started with. Can it be done? Yes. Is it quick plug and play? No, is a quick answer to that. I have and do use my sloper to compare to commercial patterns to find like broad strokes. Like I know if I lay this down on this pattern and this area is like sticking way out past the pattern, then obviously this pattern is too small for me. And I'm going to have to like either hack this pattern and grade it or make it bigger so that it at least fits my butt, because I know this fits me, right? But because I have my dart here, like they might have a dart or a seam somewhere else and it might, swing in a different way, or my shoulder slope might be different from how they've drafted it for the collar to lay in the way that they wanted the collar to lay. So I actually have a class in my private membership where I dive into all the different ways that you can use your sloper, comparing it to a commercial pattern. It can be done. There is actually a cool article that somebody did in Threads magazine a couple of years ago that I linked in that class, and I showed that method of how you can take a commercial pattern, use your sloper, and it's complicated to kind of talk about, but it is an interesting technique. I have never really used that technique, but it was an interesting technique to find. But usually I use it for like, okay, that waist is obviously huge, going to be huge on me, or there's like a lot more ease. And then you have to consider the design that you're looking at. Like, because this obviously is going to have much more room in it than compared to my sloper that's not an oversized sloper, but I don't want to make this fit my sloper because then this would turn into a very different garment, right? Like it would be much more fitted. So it's kind of a loaded question. It doesn't really work that way. It can be done and it can be useful, but it's almost kind of more complicated, but I want to let Charlotte, I want to hear from you, but then I want to talk about how I do use commercial patterns, even if I am going to use my sloper with it. But I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I agree with Josh. I think it's a good way of, if you have a block and you find a commercial sewing pattern you love, if they're similar, you can sort of, as check it. You can say, oh yeah, that's the right size. But it is stuff like shoulder angles, armholes, proportions. It's never going to be perfect. So you might still do fitting changes. And I think it has its limitation because if any design with gathers, with a raglan sleeves, all these sort of stuff, different necklines, it's going to become really complicated. And Sandra M in your chat said about, can I use a commercial sewing pattern for sewing order? Yeah, you definitely can do that. And to see where the style lines go on my sloper. I would think you can sort of use it as a starter, but again, commercial patterns are average sizes. So I would only use it as a starting point, because the whole point of having your own sloper is just to your proportions. So what's your proportion of bust to torso, long length, all these sort of things, chest. So something which looks good as a commercial sewing pattern, you might have to put somewhere different on your own block. So I would sort of, if you ever watched one of my analyses, I do use like even just images to look like where is roughly that line. And you can actually print out a photo, and you, with a ruler, you measure like, in between the bust point and the shoulder point, it's there, it's this long, and you can literally then make your own version. But it fits to your frame if you use your own body as reference, rather than a commercial sewing pattern, which is again done for commercial size, and you have no idea what Butterick's commercial sizes, what Buddha's commercial sizes. They're all a bit different, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Sandra, I'm glad that you brought that up. And we talked about this in length, actually, in my fitting. We had a fitting masterclass in my membership last night, and I actually talked about this pattern that I use. I created a 1940s jacket, a coat that I made, and I used a draft from like some old New Home sewing manual from back in the day, and completely drafted. I didn't even use my sloper. I completely drafted it from this draft that I found, and kind of compared my sloper using that to make sure I was kind of in the wheelhouse. But the thing that I used this pattern for was like the inner structure. So it is great for sewing order, because whenever we're drafting our own patterns, we don't get instructions, right? Like we don't have the instructions laid out. We're going to have to know how to put this garment together. So that is very handy. So if you're drafting a coat and you use your sloper, you can definitely use these instructions to kind of help you understand how to put it together. That's something that I use commercial patterns for. Another thing that I shared in this one has interfacing, built in to the front and to the back. So I used this as kind of like, okay, that's what their interfacing pieces look like. So after I've drafted the outer silhouette of my pattern, I know that I want to have interfacing pieces that look similar to this. So then I could use it as a guide. Like I'm not using the pieces here, but I'm going to use my pieces, my pattern pieces that I created, and create that interfacing from the pattern pieces that I have. So it's great as reference. It's great for sewing order. And it's great for, like what Charlotte was saying, looking at analysis of proportions that you want to consider on how this design looks. And then when you're comparing it to using your sloper for your body and making it kind of proportionate to, and another thing that I like is just to be able sometimes to see what these pieces look like, what I'm kind of going for as far as like a shape. Like these are princess seams, so when I'm working with my pattern draft, I know that this is, if I'm looking to create a pattern like this, using my sloper is going to be more successful. But I know that this is kind of the shapes that I'm looking to create off of the pattern that I'm drafting myself using my sloper.
I've just thought of another thing as well, where you can use blocks, or even like if you have a sewing pattern you really like which fits you well, and when you want to make a new commercial pattern, you can also use it to exclude a pattern. So if you buy a commercial sewing pattern and you look at the sleeve and you can just tell it's never gonna fit your arm, are you really going to want to spend, because sleeves again are quite horrible to fit by yourself at the back.
Sleeves or pants.
Yes, anything at the back basically. So again, it's like you can use it to exclude and say, yeah, that's never going to fit me, or it will be fit you, but it take a lot of work. So can I use a similar design, maybe different brand, which has more my sleeve shape? Because I always find it amazing the sleeve you can sort of spot quite quickly if you're even quite new to using in commercial patterns. You can sort of spot whether a sleeve is good for you or not. Yeah.
And also another thing that Sandra brought up, and then it just escaped my brain.
Oh yeah, and Suzanne on my chat is saying, I do the comparing with my block and commercial patterns all the time. I find it helpful. Yeah, I think it's more for comparing. I think you can't just sort of lay it on and chop something off and it will fit you. It's more like it's a sort of checking tool to make sure that commercial pattern will work for you. And of course,
kind of close.
Yeah, if you haven't got a block yet, you could use an existing garment you have, measure it or something, and just sort of, again, just compare the measurements and where it sits, armhole depth, all that sort of stuff to help you for that. So I think that's really helpful for that.
Talking about using different, like if you're realizing that sleeve isn't going to work well for you. The reason that I remembered now, Sandra was saying that she used a pocket pattern from another pattern that she likes, and that's like her pocket pattern that she always uses. So, you can use bits and pieces from other patterns to fill in like pockets or sleeves or things like that. And it would just be a matter of making sure that those jive together.
Yeah, right? The lines are right, isn't it? Yeah. But like say pockets,
line up, that the seams match, that all of that. Like
pocket size and pocket shape really work for all designs. You just have to see where it slots in, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, make sure that it fits in this. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and then we have Violetta is asking, for a stretch corset, what blocks would you use for that? A corset bodysuit with a woven and non-woven material? That is a very specific question. I've made stretch corsets before. It depends, stretch is, there's so many variables.
Yes. One of my friends, I think she made beautiful, she's very talented. She made beautiful corsets, and I think she literally used her skin tight block. Yeah. But then she had to basically overfit it afterwards. Right. So it's the opposite of what we normally we say, don't overfit, keep it designies. With like a stretch corset, you basically have to overfit it and take out the ease, and that depends on even the company of the fabric and stuff like that, isn't it?
And I've made a couple for like for acrobats, who have to bend over backwards and things like that. And usually I would use a stretch woven, which it's not like the same as a spandex. So that is going to be fit very differently than, say, a corset made out of spandex, which can be done. But it's going to have a lot more stretch. So you're going to have to take out much more negative ease for something that has that amount of stretch versus a stretch woven, which you're going to be pretty close to with your moulage already. And then just like you said, just overly fit it a little bit more, take it in a little bit more.
Yeah. And if
it comes down to making a mock-up out of whatever fabric you're probably planning on using and just fitting with that mock-up. I think you can start with probably any corset pattern or a moulage pattern, and then that's what I would do. So you're kind of going into, at that point, a little bit of draping, like you're getting something to start with and then going into a fitting and really seeing what it's going to do on the body in that kind of material.
Yeah, and it's like in fashion, you get these. Alexander McQueen used them quite a lot. Probably still uses them, but they're like a power net. And I think with 2 or 3 layers, because again, it's like power net, a single layer be really stretchy, but if you double or triple it, that will become really.
It's got a little bit of give, but it's still.
Yeah, I've tried it on, and they are just like amazing. They sort of just suck you in.
Yeah, and then it's used as compression.
Yeah, but they're really comfortable, like compared to normal corset. Well, normal corset keeps you very straight, isn't it? These is more like where you can then have a really drapey design, which sort of floats, but the corset is doing all the work. And that was just double power netting, I think. And again, just a moulage, basically, rather than too much negative.
Yeah,
ease.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So you're not really utilizing the stretch. The stretch is more for breathability and
Yeah.
ease of wearing, whereas a corset made out of woven wouldn't have those same properties.
Yeah, and
So
you can
yeah, I
combine the two of well. You can have some
yeah,
panels in woven and some in
yep,
stretch.
yep,
So you can have lots of fun. Actually, Trisha,
yeah.
you did a masterclass for my private pattern cutting school as well,
Oh,
so,
from
which is still
PTA
fantastic.
or stretch. Yeah. So and I wanted to point out another thing, like I said with this sweatshirt, and that is something that I'll do all the time. So when you're thinking about your project, like Kelly, she's trying to decide, does she use her new sloper that is beautifully fit that she just finished, by the way, or do you use an existing pattern? So it really depends. I think for me, it depends on the style that pattern is or what my end result is that I'm wanting to achieve. Whether I'm going to use an existing pattern or whether I'm going to start with a sloper. If I have something that already is a pattern, like a pair of pants, let's say, but pant fitting can be tricky, right? So I would never use a commercial pattern that I haven't tested the fit and not do a fitting with it. And not do a test run. But I would maybe choose that because it's got some interesting details that I don't want to have to figure out on my own, a sloper. So it's going to jump me. So I'm in that way, I'm going to focus more on the fitting, knowing I'm probably going to have to make some fitting adjustments. And I can go ahead and start as a base, start out as my sloper and add like some different design details. As an example, I just made a pair of pants using an existing pattern from Julian Creates, and I really was in the mood for bell bottoms. So the pattern was designed to be a straight leg. I had never used the pattern before. Plus, it was made for a male, and I have a slightly different shape. And so I did a test run. I added the flare. I wanted to see how the flare was, and I changed the angle of the pocket a little bit, but I didn't have to draft the waistband. I didn't have to draft the pockets. I didn't have to draft all of that. I did have to make some small adjustments to my mock-up, but I was happy with the end result, and I have a lot of experience with fitting. So you're kind of, but this sweatshirt, I knew that it wasn't a super fitted garment, so I wasn't really worried about it. I don't think I did even a mock-up for this, because if it didn't fit perfectly, it didn't really matter. So that was why I used another commercial pattern, because I knew it wasn't a super fitted garment. I just, drafted my collar and I did the high-low, and that was going to be a very easy change. It wasn't going to be something that I was going to worry and have to do a ton of fitting on. So it really it depends on what the end result that you're looking for, and like, have you tried this pattern? Do you already know that it fits you nicely, or it fits the person you're trying to make the pattern for nicely, and you just want to change up a couple of details? Why not start with it? Or if you're worried about something like a stretch corset that you want to make sure fits really nicely, you might want to start with like your melange or your block or something that you have already that you can copy off, because you don't want to be. And how much time do you have? Like, do you have time to do all these fitting adjustments, or do you just need to start with something that works, and you're just focusing on the design and the details that you want to change? And also it kind of goes back to as well, how much experience do you have, or how much do you want to challenge yourself in drafting new styles? Like if you've never made a blazer before, and you're going off of a basic block, that could be an intimidating jump, drafting from your block to a blazer. You might want to go with a blazer pattern already, fit that, know there's going to be fitting things that go into that, but then you're getting familiar with how a jacket goes together. You have the instructions to go off of, and then you're focusing more on the fitting adjustments for that, instead of like or do you want to challenge yourself and do more drafting and learn how to draft a blazer from scratch? So I think those are the questions you want to ask yourself when you're like, do I start with my sloper, or do I start with a pattern that already exists?
And I think, as Trisha said before, what's always like, in a way, what's the easiest, unless you want a big challenge. Quite often it's like revisiting a pattern you already done and doing a bit of drafting. But I always, choose the easiest way, especially with things like trousers, because you can easily adapt it and keep the waistband and stuff. But if you're quite new to trousers, you don't want to sort of refit it probably each time. So and I also, what I do nowadays, I treat all the patterns I've drafted, which are now like sewing patterns, I use them quite often to work off. So I only use my block if I want a completely different design on a fitted style. I think that's really important, what Trisha said. If it's looser, it doesn't matter as much, especially once you move into knits, if you don't have darts and stuff.
You have a lot more leeway.
A centimeter here, or like an inch of there, doesn't really matter that much. But if you for fitted styles, you don't want to do too much fitting, and that's where I sort of start from scratch. But otherwise, I always amending stuff I've already made. And in fashion industry, again, that's how it works. You might sort of, out of an 80-piece collection, there might be sort of 5 or 10 styles you do completely new, and the rest are all tweaks from 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where you still have the blocks or the patterns. Because you make blocks out of the patterns afterwards, but when you just change the color a bit or something, and it looks completely new, quite often it's just a little change. It's like Trisha and my tops are
twinsies.
Similar and completely different, aren't they? It's like a roll collar. It can look so different, can't it? No, I agree. It's sort of finding the way which works for you. I don't think there's any rules. There's also things like
no cheating. There's no cheating.
No.
Do what works best for you, which makes them, as long as you get the end result you're looking for, that was the right way.
Yes.
Kat is saying, I now use the commercial pattern S8873 that have bra sizes, easier to make adjustments and make different designs when I was sewing regularly. Good to hear from you, Kat. Nice to see you. And just to echo what you just said, Charlotta. So, like I mentioned, I've been sewing and making patterns for over 20 years, in my career. I have all the patterns I have ever created for any show. I have notebooks and notebooks. This is from this show. This is Blue Man patterns. This is Jersey Boys patterns. This is, if I make a pattern, I put it in a notebook and I save it. And when I go, when I'm asked to make other designs for other shows, I go, oh, I did something similar to that before. Let me pull out that pattern. Let me see the measurements of that performer that I did. Like, is it somewhat close? And then I'll use that, because that's going to be the easier, I've already figured out proportion. I've already figured out stretch ratio. I'm going to use a similar fabric, all of those things, because that's the quickest way to get because I don't have time. I don't have time to draw from scratch every time. I don't have time to, and most of the time I am not seeing these performers in person ever. So I'm making patterns and things that off of measurements, and I've never even seen these people. So, and a lot of times, just to explain, when I'm sending these costumes, they are received by people who know how to do fitting and adjustments and alterations to make that fit be perfect. But I want to at least get it close. It can't be completely way off and make an adjustment that they can't fix. So, definitely think of these patterns that you have already. If you've been sewing for a while and you have patterns that you've been using, like Kat was just saying, if you find a pattern that works well for you, you can do a lot with that pattern by just changing a design, adding a collar, taking off a collar, changing the sleeve style, adding a little flare, adding a peplum, taking away, doing a high-low hem, have fun with it. And that's what we want to encourage you to do. Any pattern can be a starting point because it's all using the same principles. There's definitely an advantage to using your sloper and drafting from scratch. But after you've started drafting and you have some patterns to go off of, you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel every time. You can use that and know, because you already know where that starting point is and you can build on it.
I'm going to add something to that. And I also got a question afterwards. What I was going to add is, if you're looking at your existing patterns or sewing patterns you want to adapt to your block, the general rule, it's always easier to add volume from a fitted block rather than, for example, I have A-line patterns, and then trying to work out exactly how you would refit it. is really hard unless you know you started with your block and you know where the volume comes from. So as a general rule, when you're thinking about what will work, it's always easier to start with something more fitted and, you know, do a bit of cut and slash and add volume or make it a bit wider. It's much harder to, for example, turn a relaxed block into a fitted block and having to add darts and stuff because you're not quite sure where everything has come from, all that volume. So that's sort of a good consideration to look what blocks or patterns to use. You always like, if in doubt, add something rather than trying to fit it in your fitting stage. Do you agree with that, Trisha?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also to kind of piggyback on that and from a different angle is that when you're drafting and making these changes, it's always easier when you're doing the fitting to pin things out. So if you're like, do I want to add 4 inches or do I want to just add 2 inches? Add 4 inches, pin it out if it's too much. It's kind of harder to see to add more.
But it's like where you know you've added the volume. So yeah, so it's sort of always, it's like more is easier rather than sort of trying to
you can always
retrofit it.
It's always easier to make smaller than it is to make bigger in the actual garment.
Yes, rather what I'm talking about is something with darts to something without darts, which is easier on the other way around. But you are saying make the darts bigger or something. Yes. And
Sue is saying it's always fun to have inspiration from commercial patterns and figure out how to draft them for ourselves. Yes, and that's what I love. I enjoy that challenge. I was a pattern nerd over here. Yes. I'm like, ooh, like that 40s pattern that I drafted, that was not easy, but it was fun for me. I enjoyed the process and figuring it out because to me, it's like a puzzle that I'm trying to figure out.
But it's also like you might spend half an hour drafting, which is fun, or you might spend at the same time tracing through an existing pattern, which is not as much fun, I find. So I always, I'm the same. I like figuring it out. And I had a question by Laura who said, how do you store your blocks? Is it better to hang them or to keep them flat once they're manila? And I hang mine. Yes.
I hang mine. I have them all here. And then actually because I was doing some filming before we jumped on, but I also have like I mentioned that you can purchase slopers. So these are actually my slopers that you can purchase off my website. And I recently printed them out to get ready for the weekend that we did. And so now I'm just this is my small size, I have my large and my large plus that I just have them hanging here.
Yeah, and I have these hooks you can just buy. I think you can buy a whole lot of them. Yeah. Have you got them as well?
We use these. Do you guys have this kind of style?
We probably have as well. This is sort of what we use. I've always used this one. Forever job I worked in.
So
that's UK.
Versus fun different things.
Yes.
From across the pond.
They're only, I guess, because you can hang them. They're both similar. Basically means you can hang lots of them on a clothing rail if you need it. So they're really good.
Those are called pattern hooks. They might be called the same over there, but
I think they're called pattern hooks.
Include pattern hooks in my toolkit. So like if you're looking for like needle wheel, notcher, I sell 2 toolkits just so that people don't have to because I get those tools from all over.
Yeah, and you don't want to have a box of 100, do you, when you're starting out? So you just want a few.
Yeah. I think I give 5 in the toolkits, so you can hang. And I don't hang, like I mentioned, I have notebooks full, folded of patterns, for shows and things. But my slopers and blocks that I would use all the time, those are the ones that I hang.
Yeah, I've got all the patterns are in envelopes for me. And I think we talked about it last time that you can make a filing system if you want to. So you have a quick glance, which are your notebooks, but we always used to have one folder which had all the line drawings and the numbers, and then you can go to
this is
different
my personal one, so it's got all of my patterns like that. And so I would do that for a show. It would be Jersey Boys, and then it would have all my
so then you can find it easily. And I've got Amara saying as well, she uses one pattern all the time, and then she challenges herself to design more versions. And that's perfect. And because it's like your block basically, Amaris, and then you're just now doing the fun bit rather than
Yeah,
going back
that's
to
the fun
zero
part.
again. Yes.
That's why I was like, let's not start with that hard, complicated drafting
Yeah.
that I never do, even though I think it's fun and challenging, until you get comfortable with like knowing how patterns work, like what Charlotta was saying
Yeah, it's a sort of
earlier.
challenge you want once a year, but you don't sort of want to do it. I actually admire
All the
people
time.
who do made-to-measure tailoring, who literally always start from the
Yeah.
drafting.
They're
But yeah,
always drafting.
I like the fun. I like the designing bit and the
Yeah.
pattern cutting bit for that.
And Victoria's saying you want to start having fun with patterns, but you're still recovering from surgery, but you are recovering so quickly. And I'm glad to see you around. We like seeing you come to these lives and stuff.
Yes.
And I will say, I have a hard time being a pattern nerd who likes to, because we're, I always think of sewing people in general. Like if you're making your own garments, we're a bit rebellious, right? We're like, we don't like what's in the stores. We're going to make whatever we want out of whatever fabric we want. And we're going to do it to the design we want.
And it will fit. It will fit as well.
And it will fit exactly the way we want. So we're kind of a little bit rebellious by nature anyway. And then you go into the pattern nerd kingdom, us all here, us lovely people. And we're like, that's a great pattern and all, but I want it to be uniquely mine. I'm going to add my little collar to that, or I'm going to make bell bottoms out of your straight pants. It's like, I have rarely opened, like if I ever use a pattern, it's rare that I take it out of the envelope and I use it exactly the way that it's drafted. I think that's just innately.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd be buying something from a shop again, isn't it?
Right.
It's like you make it your own.
Exactly. I want to make it mine. I want to make it unique, right?
And I actually love it. I call it quite often. I don't know how you use that word in the US. You say fudging? It's when you sort of do something you're not quite supposed to do, but it works. Yeah.
Fudging? Yeah. If Mella's still here, she used to say, you just wudge it in. And she's like, that's the technical term. You wudge it in or you fudge it. Yeah, you just fudge it and make it work.
But that's just like once you understand how pattern cutting works, like fudging is the fun bit where you just know you're not supposed to do it, but you know it works. And yeah.
We're rebels.
Yes.
We like to break the rules
and you can break rules quite safely, isn't it?
Yeah, if you know the rules, you know how to break them, right?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, we could obviously talk about all of this all
but we've been here for an hour, so let's wrap things up.
It's our time to go. But Sheila, she's excited. She just got her slopers fitted to herself, and so she's excited to get going. Mela says that is the technical term. She is still here. I've learned lots of great sayings from Mela over the years. She has some good ones. So yeah, that's great. Anyway, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We always enjoy hanging out with you. Like we said, we do this once a month, have a little pattern chat. So we already discussed it. We're not always this together, but we did discuss it before we jumped on. We will be doing our next live at the end of March 27th. I think we're going to talk about what tools are a waste of money.
But we're not gonna, because I suggested, and I don't like being negative, so I
don't want to be too negative.
Let's say good tools versus waste of money, or stuff you might not need yet, or stuff we might have bought and then just never used in 10 years.
So we'll talk about that.
We're gonna save you money basically next time.
What you absolutely need and would use right away, and then what you can kind of pick up along the way later on. That's
and things nice. You might covet for years, and when you buy it and you don't actually need it.
Yeah, or that you're only going to use like once every 5 years. So that's what we'll be talking about next time. Please give us a thumbs up so that we can tell YouTube we've got pattern nerd fans out there that like hanging out with us, so that they will find more of us and grow our community. And also do check out Charlotta's drafting challenge that she has coming up very soon, next week, right?
Yes, next Wednesday.
So that link is down below. Have a bit of fun
and
learning.
Have a look at Trisha's links as well.
And then I have 2 links available. Hi, Tremaine. Thank you. I have 2 links available. So we do have, if you're like, I want into this private pattern cutting membership, the Pattern Place, get on the wait list, because we have a pre-sale coming up very soon, special bonuses. early access. We have a Clo 3D class that we're teaching in March that you would get live access to with the very skilled Ellie Wilcox. And then we also have PatternCon, which is coming. So PatternCon, we are giving out information as it's coming out, but we're still building things on the back end. But there is a party list so that we know you want to go. You can sign up for that. And PatternCon.com it's just like a coming soon right now, but soon that will be our full-blown website. We should have that up by the middle of next week or the middle of next month, excuse me. So there will be more exciting details coming up about PatternCon really soon.
And there's also quite a few lives on your channel about PatternCon if you're interested, aren't they? So
yes.
Have a look at those.
If you're curious about what PatternCon is or what I'm even talking about, I do have some past lives where we were talking about like what you guys want to have. So we are considering all of those things as we're putting things together, calling teachers in, getting keynote speakers, all of the things. So we're getting vendors in, like I'm listening to all of you. So if you go back to our later lives, then you can hear more about PatternCon. We're very excited. It's where pattern lovers can come together and learn and hang out. And
Trisha, next time for our next live, I expect you to know all your keywords or your slogan properly. Expect a recital.
I will know my slogan. It's
Yes.
gathered together. It's like patterns that inspire, skills that connect us.
Oh, lovely.
I gotta know. I gotta pay attention.
Yes.
I'll have it figured out next live, I promise. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see you in our free offerings and we'll see you next time.
See you next
Bye-bye.
time.